From epic sagas to pivotal moments, how a writer uses scale can make a huge difference to how their story lands with their readers. In this video, I want to give you some ideas and examples of how you can use scale to enhance your story and draw attention to what matters in it. The examples I'm going to use are from Emily St John Mandel's new novel Sea of Tranquillity, which isn't actually out yet, but my wife's a book blogger and she managed to get me a pre-release proof. But don't worry, I'm not going to spoil the story. Everything I'm going to talk about can be found in the blurb on the back of the book. So, in terms of scale, Emily St John Mandel uses a really unique technique to emphasise the little moments in the lives of her characters, but then at other times widens the perspective of the book to emphasise distance. I've got examples of both, and we're going to look at the effects of both the small and the large scale passages, starting with a unique technique I've never seen before that really effectively uses the small scale. So to give you some context, and again no spoilers, Sea of Tranquillity is a novel about a moment, a particular moment in the course of the book that the blurb on the back describes like this. For a split second, all is darkness, and the notes of a violin echo unnaturally in the air. That split second is all important to the plot of the novel. It needs to be emphasised, and the way Emily St John Mandel does that is by allowing us readers to linger in that moment just for a little longer by splitting it. Nothing too unique about that, I'd agree. I've seen plenty of other writers leave their readers in a moment while they change to a flashback or switch between the past and the present, something like that, like a cliffhanger. We've seen that done before, but I've never seen it done in the middle of a sentence, in the middle of a chapter. But that's exactly what happens in Sea of Tranquillity. Chapters 7 and 8 of part 1 are split in that exact way, in the middle of a moment. Within minutes, Edwin is alone again, gazing up at the branches. He steps forward into a flash of darkness, like sudden blindness or an eclipse. So, what's the effect of this exactly? Well, the first time I read it, it did a couple of things for me. Firstly, it slowed that moment down by forcing me to go to another chapter on another page. That moment was elongated. It lasted longer than it would have if I just read it all together simply on one page. This, I think, allowed those two parts to take up more space in my mind. It made me take more notice of this moment. The second thing is that it emphasised the importance of that moment. It's a turning point in the book, and the way it's split creates both a hard ending and a new beginning where they wouldn't exist before. Without it, that moment would still obviously feel important, but it just wouldn't have such clear and well-defined boundaries. A turning point in the story becomes a physical difference on the page, forcing the reader to slow down and take notice of what's going on. It activated slow motion for me and reinforced how important those moments were. It's a really great way to give something that really couldn't be smaller in scale, a split second, more room on the page and more chance to make an impact on your reader. So if you're in the middle of a story right now or you're planning one, what could this be used for? Well, in my opinion, I think this kind of focus is perfect for a moment where a character has to make a tough decision. It's a turning point and it's something that requires a lot of consideration at the same time. Slowing that process down might help to build a bit of tension with your readers as they await the outcome of the decision, especially if you've already established the consequences of a bad decision or the benefits of a good one. The harder the decision, the better this might work and the more invested your audience might feel as those seconds start to tick by and time begins to run out. All of that focus on just 1 second of the story might lead you to believe that Sea of Tranquillity is a hyper-focused book and it's extremely detailed throughout, but really there's a rich variation to how it's written. There's a grand scale to it too, like a lot of Emily St John Mandel's books. For all the attention she draws towards the significance of seconds, there are also these expansive compass aligning moments throughout the story that widen our perspective too. The inlets and coves and little islands are on their starboard side, and just beyond them rises the immensity of Vancouver's island, its forests ascending into mountains whose summits are lost in low clouds. On the port side, where they're standing, the ocean extends uninterrupted until, as far as Edwin can figure out, the coast of Japan. I've talked many times before about this zoom out effect in her writing, about how it adds context and it places the story so well in time and space, and it does. But what I also think it does is provide contrast for the very small moments. It would be far more difficult to communicate the smallness and the feeling of seconds ticking by in a character's lives without some vast horizon spanning distance to compare it to. But likewise, only by concentrating on the very tiny moments of our lives can we appreciate just how large the world around us really is. But Roberts is watching him too intensely, and in the quiet of this one-room church at the far edge of the Western world, Edwin is oddly spooked. I've always loved scale like this in stories. I find it inspiring to read passages where it feels like the author can just spin the earth like a globe on their desk, but at the same time appreciate one tiny gesture from one small character and the infinity that is time. It's an effect I tried to bring to my writing from the very first attempt at writing I ever made as an adult, when I wrote the opening to what I thought was going to be my first novel at university. Neither land nor sky was visible, only the blur in between that can only be seen from an aeroplane. I didn't get too far with that novel, and judging by that opening, which is subjectless and kind of passive, it's really no big loss. But as you can see, I was trying to get at the scale there. I was trying to contrast the second by second moment looking out of the aeroplane window with the vastness of the earth and the sky. I just didn't really have the tools to do it. Over the last few years, I've really focused heavily on writing short fiction, but recently I rediscovered the opening of a novel I was writing in 2020, and what did I see in one of those early chapters but another attempt at this technique? There was a crooked shadow of a sunken dock in the water. Kieren stood on the shore and stared into it while she waited, her backpack sitting in the sand at her feet. Ahead of her, the vast expanse of the Indian Ocean, where a capsized dinghy could float unobserved and lost for years before finally washing up in tatters on some empty shore. That, at least to me, is an improvement over my first attempt. It's evidence that I've taken notice of what works and what doesn't, and tried to take steps to learn. Of course, the entire craft of writing is always a work in progress. That's my general approach to all writing, trying to spot weaknesses and gaps and fill them where I can in a game that I can never really win. I can just get a little better at each time. I go from the intricate line-by-line moments, the spelling mistakes and the phrasing corrections, to the large-scale changes in the direction of the story and the shape of the entire book. I've taken some time away and now I really want to get back to novel writing, and this technique of varying scale is one of the things I'm really excited to put to use. It's one of just many inspirations I've taken from Emily St John Mandel's work. I'm going to build from those tiny lines and those little ideas into a story that's already stretching out in front of me into something grand in scale. The ideas are finally here again, but they haven't always been. There have been moments where I've doubted I'll ever have the energy or the inspiration to write another novel again, and I'm sure that feeling will come back to me at some point. But this time, when it does, I've got a way to beat it. If you're stuck for ideas right now, whether that's where to take your novel next or what kind of story you want to write in the first place, watch this video next for a simple approach to finding an idea that might just get you moving.